Hey everyone, Ren here. Hope everyone's enjoying the night. Thanks to all the new subscribers to the channel. Welcome. If you're listening and haven't subscribed, please hit that button for me. Really appreciate it. Now, let's get to tonight's story. The Childhood Eaters, written and read by Ren Bryant. The best I can figure, I'm only a few miles away from town. I remember the car ride after I was kidnapped. Though my head was covered with a sack and I wasn't exactly sure where we went, the ride was short, maybe 10 minutes tops. It was smooth and then bumpy at the end, the feeling of ruts over a worn dirt road. I was lucky to escape the barn. Kids turned to old people in some dilapidated wooden structure in the middle of the woods, maybe a mile off the road I'm on. There were 11 of us left. We had a few more, but Father Time came for them. It was that weird voodoo magic that our captors did. That's how we all aged. Every time they slit the neck of some chicken, poured its blood on us, and did those weird dances, we got older. That's when I escaped, when they were doing one of their weird rituals. Usually they kept us under watch and kept the barn door chained shut, but this last kid they brought in, he was really fighting them. I mean, he was walloping them, swinging and kicking and jerking like he was riding the electric chair. It took all of the captors to keep this kid subdued, and that's when I ran. Well, I didn't run, I moved as quickly as I could, getting out before they could notice someone was missing. One foot in front of the other, that's what I keep telling myself, no matter how much I ache. I've seen so much. I have so much to tell. I gotta keep my old bones going. Get to people. Get help. Go home. Tell mom and dad, the police, anyone. There's a dim glowing light from the blackness ahead of me. I think it's the lights of downtown Oak Grove. Salvation. It's not that far now. It's difficult to move fast, but I must hurry. I don't know if they're gonna be coming for me or if they're still doing that ritual to the new kid. Spraying him with chicken blood and chanting those weird chants, making him age decades in minutes. The streetlights blind my eyes as I near, giving me long crooked shadows the size of a house. The streets are quiet at this time of night. Stores are shuttered and streetlights flash yellow. It's later than my parents ever allowed me to go out, so I've never seen the town like this before. I noticed the window display in McGregor's Electronics, my favorite store. The glow from the TVs running the news made the sidewalk flicker. I stopped for a breath and also to see what's going on. News tonight of another missing child in Oak Grove, the fourth one in as many months, the closed captioning reads. Authorities say they have no leads. On the TV screen is a picture of a boy named Daryl Green. A black boy with a goofy smile wearing a Vikings jersey. Daryl. That's the boy that was brought in the barn tonight. The one they were pouring chicken blood on. The one that thrashed and smashed and provided me the cover to escape. I need to get to the police to tell them where he's at. Where the others are at. In the distance, coming from the direction I came, I see the headlights from a car. I need to get off this street. It could be them. It could be someone I could ask for help too, but I can't take that chance. I'm too old to run. Next to McGregor's is an alley and I find a trash bin to hide behind. I sit my aching bones down, marveling at how fragile my body has become. A few months ago, I was an 8-year-old kid, playing Roblox and soccer and not thinking about much else. I don't know how it happened. What sort of voodoo magic's at work, but somehow I went from 8 to ancient in that barn. I try to remember the layout of Oak Grove. Memories are distant and fuzzy, fragments of puzzle pieces that don't quite fit together. My mind feels like it's Swiss cheese. If I'm correct, the police station is 3 lefts and a right away. Or maybe it's all left turns, I'm not sure. When my mom would drive around, I wouldn't pay too much attention to those things, though now I wish I did. I've biked the area a couple times when my mom would go shop at the farmer's market in the parking lot of the Oak Grove Plaza. I think I'm about a mile from home. Sometimes we would bike to the Sunday farmer's market, and I would complain my legs were going to fall off from all the pedaling. My mom would say, "It's only a mile." It seems so far now, though. I'm not sure my brittle bones can make it that far. When I stand up, things pop and crack and my mouth lets out a reflexive groan. My body makes a decision for me. Head to the police. They're closer. I approached the police station with a mixture of fear and hope. Fear that they wouldn't believe my story and hope that they still would help me. It was late. The station was closed, but there was an intercom buzzer for emergencies. I pressed it and waited anxiously for someone to answer. "Hello? Can I help you?" a gruff voice said. "Hi, my name is Dan Wentgill. I'm one of the missing kids. I'm 8 years old. I was taken to the woods in this barn. There were animal sacrifices, weird dancing and chanting. I think it's voodoo. They stole my youth. They turned me into this wrinkled old man." It all just came blurting out. I didn't mean to say so much. There was a long pause before the voice spoke again. "Sir, are you drunk or something? That's quite a story you're telling me." "I'm not drunk. Please, you have to believe me. I need help." "Sorry, sir. I can't help you. You're either a kook or you're a drunk. Go home and sleep it off." I felt the pang of despair as I shuffled away from the police station. How could they not believe me? I was telling the truth. I looked at my wrinkled hands. That's why they didn't believe me. Though my body screamed for rest, I walked the mile to my parents' house. In the reflection of the window next to the door, I stared at my face, my old face. I couldn't believe how I looked. I had to touch it to make sure I wasn't dreaming. My skin was a weathered canvas of age and decay. The skin was thin and pulled tight around my bony contours. My lips were chapped, shriveled worms. Deep creases furrowed into my brow, and my cheeks sagged with the weight of time. My ghostly eyes were sunken and roomy, peering out from under heavy lids. This couldn't have been the future me. If it was, at some point in the future, I had to have broken my nose because this old man nose was crooked. Its shape resembled that of a hawk's beak, giving me an almost predatory look. My parents would react the same way as the police, I thought. There's no way they would recognize me. Now, my ears don't work too good, so I can't really hear what I sound like, but I'm praying that maybe Mom or Dad recognize my voice or something. I paused before knocking. It was the middle of the night. I didn't want to scare them, but I had to try. So I held my breath and knocked. After what seemed like an eternity, it opened. My mother stood there in her pink bathrobe, her eyes widening in shock. "Hi, Mom," I said and cracked a toothy smile. I felt my saggy skin rise on my face. "Dan?" I didn't say anything. I just looked into her eyes, hoping she would see the truth, that it was me, her son, despite what her eyes told her. My mom got teary as she squinted at me, her head cocked sideways like she was trying to figure out where the last puzzle piece went. Finally, her face softened and went slack. "Dan?" she said again. My father opened the door wide and I was face to face with a shotgun barrel. "What the hell's going on?" "Phil, wait!" my mom yelled. "It's Dan! It's really him!" Tears streamed down her face and she clutched me tight. My father lowered the shotgun and stared at me. I gave him the same toothy smile I gave my mom. "My God, it is you!" Dad said as he squeezed us both. We sat in the living room and I told him everything that had happened to me, how I was taken, the strange rituals in the barn by some voodoo cult, and how I have been aged decades in just a few months. And I also told him about the other children, the ones being aged like me. My parents listened in horror, their faces pale and their eyes filled with tears. "How? Why?" my dad said. I shrugged. I didn't know the answers. I didn't know how or why, only that there was something that the children had that they wanted. We have to go to the police, my mother said, her voice trembling with anger. They won't believe us, I said. I already tried. They said I was drunk. But we have to try, my mother said. She hit her fist in her open palm as an exclamation point. Well, what if we had proof? I said. My dad leaned forward. I think I know where it's at in the woods, I said. We can drive there, get close enough to take a picture of the place, and then show that to police. My parents nodded in agreement, first to each other and then to me. Okay, Dan, we'll do it your way, my mom said. She smiled a smile that said she liked being a mom again, no matter my age. It felt good to be back with my parents. Even though I was older than them, I felt comfortable around them, safe and secure. My dad parked the car where I thought we exited the woods last night. While I was pretty sure it was the spot, we wandered around for an hour and found nothing. I had to stop to take many breaks. My dad started to get on me a little bit, and I told him I'm sorry, my brain's a bit foggy. He nodded and smiled softly. I understand, he said. After another break, we continued. I stepped carefully through the dense underbrush. The woods were pitch black, and I could barely see a few feet in front of me. Coming back to the woods was a bad idea. I should have listened to them, and we should have gone back to the police. The snap of twigs ahead of me made me freeze. Hello? I said to the darkness. It was silent. Too silent. Mom? Dad? I just realized that they're no longer next to me. I'm alone. I'm back to being an 8-year-old, shaking and alone, lost in the woods. Dan, help! It was my mom. She sounded panicked. Dan! They have Dad! The snapping of twigs became heavy stomps and I turned to run. My legs couldn't move faster than a shuffle. I couldn't outrun whatever was coming for me, whoever was coming for me. So I hid behind a tree. I sat and pulled my knees to my chest and tried to make myself as small as possible. The steps became louder, so close now. I held my breath, and they ran right past me. I saw from behind that they had the clothes on of the cult. Even in the darkness, they stood out in their all-white tops and bottoms. I sat still and let them run until I could no longer hear them. Mom, I whispered. Mom! More twigs snapping made me freeze. My eyes darted left and right. It was the voodoo cult. I knew it. They were coming back for me. I would never get out of this alive. They would drag me back to the barn, that dimly lit place of pain, that place of aging, of aching bones, of hunched backs, sore muscles, droopy skin, and faded memories. From the darkness came an arm, something wicked, and it was my mom. Before I can get to my feet, she bent down and hugged me tight. Her embrace felt so good. They got Dad, Mom said as she wiped away tears. I don't know what happened. We were walking shoulder to shoulder when somebody came from behind. They grabbed him by the mouth. When I saw it, I ran. What are we going to do now? I asked. My body hurts. I can't fight these guys. I know, baby, I know, my mom said. Let's get out of here. Let's go to the police. I dropped my chin onto my mom's shoulder and squeezed her as much as my ancient bones would allow. A child's scream made us clench each other tight. It's got to be coming from the barn, I whispered. It sounds close. I wanted to leave, but I knew we couldn't. Not with my dad now missing. Not if we were this close. My mom must have been thinking the same thing because she took my hand and nodded her head in the direction of the scream. We cautiously made our way through the trees, following the sound of cries, stopping every few feet to listen for other footsteps. As we drew closer, we heard the screaming growing louder and more intense. Past the thicket, we saw a dim light. It was the barn. An eerie glow of the moon shone down upon its metal roof, casting long shadow fingers across the ground. Light from the inside filtered through the gaps in the dilapidated structure's wooden walls. There were no signs of my dad, nor anyone else outside. I cautiously followed my mom, holding her trembling hand, as we walked to the side of the barn. The familiar scent of hay and dust filled my nostrils, and I tried to shake it out of my head. I smelled that smell for months in the barn, and I hated it. My mom stuck her eyeball into a knothole and covered her gasping mouth with what she saw. She moved out of the way and I peered in. The barn was as I left it, a stack of hay at one side, a pen of chickens on the other. Next to the chickens was a mess of red, what I knew to be chicken blood, and ropes that were used to tie down the children and do their ritual over them. In between was a group of old-timers huddled together, some sitting, some standing, some sleeping. And there was one boy, the one in the Minnesota Viking shirt, the one I had seen on TV, the one that caused the fit and allowed me to escape. Daryl, I think his name was. At the back end, being held hostage by two of the cult members, was my dad. His head hung low and his face was black and blue. They really did a number on him. I counted 4 cult members, 2 men and 2 women, the same faces I had seen when I was being held hostage. Sometimes I would see a 5th person there, but the steps came out of nowhere from behind. As I turned, I saw my mom scratching and clawing a figure in white. My heart skipped. I thought I was having a heart attack. "Run!" Mom screamed. I did. I shuffled as fast as I could while she continued to fight. When I got to a big enough tree to hide behind, I got on my knees and peeked out as the man dragged my mom away. My chest heaved and my shoulders sank. I was doomed. Tears dribbled out of my eyes. I didn't know what I was going to do. What could I do in the state I was in? I was weak and old and alone. Truly alone now. At least when I escaped from the barn the first time, my parents were still safe. It's all my fault now. I was so stupid for coming back here. With my head in my hands, I sat with my thoughts. I didn't even think I had the stamina to get out of the woods and go to the police again. And even if I could, would they dismiss me again? I knew it was just a matter of time. The cult would eventually capture me. But then a glimmer of hope flickered in my mind. I'm not alone. There's others like me, others trapped in the barn. Sure, they may be old too, but they would help. They wanted out of this nightmare too. Sometimes in the darkness, when we curled up close to share body heat in the barn, we'd whisper about trying to gang up on the cult members. But we were scared children turned to old weak bones. We didn't think we could do anything. But we had the will to do something, I thought. And my mom always said, where there's a will, there's a way. I needed to find a way to reach them, to unite our strengths against the cult, to free them and my mom and dad. I carefully went back to the knothole to look at the situation again. I shivered when I saw my parents. My mom was thrown next to my dad and they clutched each other, crying. They were always so strong for me. It was tough seeing them like this. It was time for me to be strong for them, I thought. They won't have the same energy, one of the cult members said angrily to the others. It doesn't matter, another one said. Energy can always be manipulated. It can always be transformed. We can still benefit. But they won't be good enough, a third cult member yelled. I'd often hear them talk about harnessing energy. I didn't exactly understand, but I figured it had to do with why they picked us up, why they were doing what they were doing. With the cult members distracted in argument, I thought I had a good chance to gain the upper hand. Psst! The old ones didn't hear me, but Daryl turned his head. I stuck my finger through the knothole and wiggled it like a worm. I figured that would be better than a creepy old man eye looking at him. I pulled my finger out and looked and saw Daryl scooting his butt backwards towards me. The cult members continued to talk. The discussion was heated and they raised their voices at each other and pointed to my mom and dad. Daryl leaned down on his elbow, putting his ear close to the knothole. "Hey, remember me?" I said. "That's my mom and dad over there. I need all of you to help." I told Daryl the plan, and then I said a prayer and stood on my feet, dusting myself off and stretching my back. I didn't know how much more activity I could take, but I had to get through this. I took a deep breath and silently counted to 3. "Woot! Woot!" I shrieked, trying to make as much sound as I could, pretending I was an alarm going off. "It's working," Daryl said through the knothole. "Good, let's go," I said. "Woot! Woot! You forgot me," I yelled as I went to the tree line. I flapped my arms like a bird to make sure I would provide enough distraction. I continued to hoot and holler until they locked their eyes on me. "There he is!" one of them shouted and pointed. They took off after me as I ducked into the darkness of the forest. From inside the barn, I heard a commotion. I prayed Daryl was taking care of them inside, getting the other seniors worked up enough to take out the person holding my parents captive. The seniors outnumbered the voodoo cult members, but I knew Ancient Bones could only fight so much. But if they could provide enough distraction, I knew my parents could take control. Footsteps crunched pine needles on the forest floor. The cult members walked slow, stalking me. I checked myself to make sure I was as tucked away as possible under the shrubbery. I didn't even want a toe to be seen by the moonlight. I wrapped my arms around my shin and made myself into a ball. "Where'd he go?" I heard one of the men say. He was so close, I could hear his huffing breath. I bit my lip and tried to slowly breathe through my nose. If I made the slightest sound now, I'd be a goner. The fighting noises continued in the barn, things being thrown and tossed, screaming and shouting. More steps, all walking towards me. The cult members coming together, heel to toe, softly crunching the forest floor debris. "Look closely," a woman said. "He's too old to have gone far." Through tiny branches filled with broad, droopy leaves, I watched as the cult members made their way through the forest. They moved stealthily past me. The moon made the shadows bounce off the tree trunks. I knew that I couldn't continue hiding for much longer. Every fiber of my being was yearning to stretch out. "Gotcha!" One of them grabbed me from behind. I didn't even know he was there. He held me in a bear hug so tight I thought it was going to break my ribs. "Let me go!" I screamed as I tried to wiggle myself free. Suddenly, in the distance, the barn door flew open. It was my parents, followed by Daryl, followed by a horde of old folks who shuffled with fists raised high, yelling in victory with scratchy voices. "Over here!" I shouted. The cult member slammed me to the ground so hard I moaned in agony. I think I dislocated my shoulder. The other cult members took off and ran towards the geriatric gang. The one holding me down pulled out a buck knife and held it to my throat. "Don't move, don't speak." Through the twigs and branches, I watched as the men fought with the old folks and my parents and Daryl. There was punching and kicking and circles of people being formed, so I couldn't see all of what was going on. I heard screaming and yelling, what sounded like old bones being broken, people hitting the dirt. I felt the blade of the knife press harder into my throat. It made my Adam's apple tickle and I wanted to scratch it, but I knew if I moved, I died. "Eee!" came a scream from behind me. My mom came flying over top of me, tackling the man who held me down. They fought in the bushes. I couldn't see them through the darkness, but I heard my mom shriek in terror. My dad rushed past me. I don't even think he knew I was there on the ground, and he attacked the person my mom was fighting with. The sound of a large rock splitting ahead like watermelon reverberated through the forest. The fighting stopped. "Jessica!" my dad screamed. I got up and moved as quickly as I could to his side. Moonlight made the blood splattered on his face glow. My mom was on the ground, holding a buck knife that was sticking out of her belly. Blood dribbled out of her mouth. "Mom!" I gently bent down next to her. She put her bloody hands on my wrinkled face and looked at me with soft eyes and a smile. "I can't lose you, Mom," I said, holding her hand in mine against my face. My dad bent down and tended to my mom's wound. He held his hand against her stomach, trying to stop the bleeding. The darkness of the night made the blood look like black oil that bubbled from between his fingers. "Jessica, hang in there, baby," he said. I squeezed my mom's hand. She didn't squeeze back. "Mom!" "You'll never lose me," she said, staring at me with eyes that were becoming glassy and distant. "I'll always be there with you." My mom closed her eyes and was gone. A gang of old men and women circled around us. Daryl, too. "We got them all," Daryl said. "All that we could find anyways, though I'm not sure if there's more out there or not." His words were distant. Everything was distant as my mind drifted to thoughts about my mom. When I was held hostage, it was my mom I thought about most. I thought about her as I aged prematurely, and I understood what she meant about the aches and pains of getting older, the things she always used to talk about. My mom had always been there for me, and I guess she was again tonight when she saved me from the cult member with the knife. I can't believe she's gone. Together, my dad and I, plus a young boy and a group of old folks, walked out of the woods. My dad tried to put his arm around my shoulder, but I shrugged him off. I was old enough to mourn on my own.